This episode is brought to you by Nature's Bounty. Nature's Bounty believes your body is brilliant, naturally designed to thrive, inside and out. For those always looking for new ways to support your health from head to heels, Nature's Bounty has a range of over 400 vitamins and supplements born from 50 years of trust and care. Nature's Bounty. It's in your nature. Visit naturesbounty.com to learn more.
The McDonald's snack wrap is back. You brought it back. Ranch snack wrap. Spicy snack wrap. You broke the internet. For a snack. Snack wrap is back. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
John Legend, Sheryl Crow, Elvis Costello, and Alanis Morissette star in the MGM Plus original series, Words and Music. Iconic artists share intimate performances and the stories behind the songs. New episodes Sundays on MGM Plus.
Welcome to the New Books Network.
I'm Chris Holmes, and this is Burned by Books. Here you'll find interviews with writers you already love, like Jennifer Egan and Rebecca Mackay, mixed in with up-and-coming voices like Alexandra Kleeman and Rumaan Alam. You'll find us wherever you listen to podcasts, but check out previous episodes at burnedbybooks.com and on Instagram and Twitter at burnedbybooks. Let's start the show. Imagine that you are running as fast as you can up a hill. Your legs are screaming, lactic acid swells them and makes each limb feel like iron. Your lungs struggle to fill with oxygen and your heart pumps about 100 beats per minute faster than normal. Add to this that you're being chased by a horde of teenagers and 20-somethings, each with seemingly limitless endurance and will. And you've done this to yourself on purpose. You might even love it. Stephanie Rentz's novel, We Loved to Run, takes us into the minds and pumping hearts of the Frost College cross-country team, led by Kristin, the star runner from Boise, Danielle, the team captain, Harriet, budding feminist icon and possessor of an indomitable work ethic, Chloe, Kristin's main competition and frenemy, desperate for the praise of her busy New York City parents, Liv, a talented, also ran with a serious boyfriend, and Patricia, an underclassman eager to leave Frost. We Love to Run imagines this team as both amoebic and a collective we, speaking in a single voice and thinking of nothing but the run, and as distinct individuals whose lives have just begun to bloom, but already show signs of hurt and mistrust. Rather than a novel about running, We Love to Run is a novel that takes running as a nearly perfect metaphor for that agonizing and enigmatic irony that the perfect and powerful younger bodies of women are too often constrained and demeaned, asked to shrink and disappear by those around them. In this riveting novel that asks you to feel the pain of every step of a race and puts you in the running shoes of women who are ready to be seen and heard by the world, Stephanie Rentz has brought into perfect view a snapshot of small college life in the late 20th century that manages to be an eerie reflection of our absolute present. She also takes seriously the lives of young people and gives us the concept of the teammate as perhaps the epitome of how women and people in general might care for those who exist outside direct kinship, but who are assuredly family. Stephanie Rentz is the author of The Kissing List, a collection of stories that was an editor's choice in the New York Times Book Review, and I Meant to Kill Ye, a bibliomemoir chronicling her journey into the strange void at the heart of Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. She has twice received an O. Henry Prize for her short fiction. Rentz received a B.A. from Amherst College, where she ran on the cross-country team all 4 years, a B.A. from the University of Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar, and an MFA from the University of Arizona. She was a Stegner Fellow at Stanford University. Welcome to Burned by Books, Stephanie Rentz.
Chris, I'm so happy to be here. I love your podcast, and thank you for such a beautiful introduction.
Thank you so much. I'll just out myself. I am a runner of many, many years and decades now. And so when I saw this book existed, I knew that I was going to read it and hopefully love it. And love it I did. And for so many reasons, even beyond the running. But one of the things that just captured me and mesmerized me about the book is how you use certain narrative voices to draw us into the world of this team. And I was wondering if you would read a little bit from the opening of We Love to Run.
I'd be happy to. We loved running because we loved repetition. Breathe, stride, breathe, stride, breathe, stride, getting lost in thought. The endorphins that flooded our brains after several miles and swept away obsession and weariness and narrowed our focus to covering each kilometer of the 5K cross-country race as swiftly as possible. We loved it because it was who we were, who we'd been in high school, who we hoped to be in futures we couldn't yet imagine. Strong and fast, fast and strong. We loved winning, but we didn't always love what was required. Cross-training, pool workouts, the flotation belts that we wore while running in place in the deep end, serious stretching, form drills, walking backward uphill, cool downs that were more than 5 minutes, and warm-ups that were more than 10. Chloe really hated lifting. Harriet did too, though she put on a good show by doing high reps with almost no resistance. She wanted to like lifting because Professor Witt, an old-school feminist who taught WAGs, swore by weight training. Women could be just as strong as men, Witt claimed. They just needed to get over the social stigma of muscles. Whatever, we thought. Witt had never run a mile in her life. We also hated rest days and easy laps between 400-meter repeats, not because we hated resting, but because it was never quite long enough to recover. Anticipating a workout was always worse than finishing one. Fartlicks, which the men pronounced fartlicks, could make us puke. We growled when the men urged, "Go tits out, ladies." We hated that word, ladies, more than we hated the word tits. Tits could be thrilling in the right context. We hated running on rainy days until the moment we were drenched, sucking water from the end of a hank of hair. On hot days, sunscreen stung our eyes, but we could skinny dip in Puffer's Pond. And we did, especially if the men were doing a separate workout and we expected an ambush. We liked the men's team, though screwing them could feel like making out with your brother. It could be nicer than that, too. It depended on how you felt about someone else's bruised toenails, bony hips, rock-hard thighs. We loved to run, and we hated it. To run, you had to be willing to accompany yourself on long, lonely journeys. You might know the time, 90 minutes, 2 hours, 45, but not the route. Maybe you knew the route through a shady residential neighborhood, through the park with a hill that looks like a camel's hump, onto the trail just beyond the tennis courts, and then up, 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 the foothills opening in front of you like another world, the old military cemetery, the firing range, the corral where several weary horses shifted from hoof to hoof and ambled to the fence, wondering whether you'd palm them an apple. Even if you knew where you were going and how long it usually took, you could never anticipate what you would see along the way. Back home in New Mexico, Patricia saw rattlesnakes in late May and early June when they were coming out of hibernation. They draped themselves across trails, seeking a sunny spot to warm their cold hearts. And Patricia hurled right over them. Chloe saw a skunk at the northern edge of Central Park that might have just been a skinny dog. Liv got lost in cornfields in southern Illinois, where her dad's family was from. Danielle was chased and bitten by bats, not just once, but twice over the course of 2 weeks just before sophomore year. She was running along the soupy Seekonk River in Providence. It was not a joking matter. Even there was something inherently absurd about being bitten twice in a 3-week stretch and having to get all those rabies shots. Was she cursed? If you mentioned it, you were courting Danielle's wrath. We sank to our ankles in mud. We slipped in snow. We got heat stroke in the summer, mild frostbite in the winter, but those were just minor hazards. The real obstacle, underneath the sharp pain in a hip, the mechanical clicking of a knee, the weird way that teeth ached from huffing in winter air, the real obstacle unchanging and always there, was the desire to stop and the knowledge we couldn't. We could never stop because if we did, then we would know we could. If you stopped once, you might stop a second time. You might never run again.
Thank you so much. That was so great to hear you read it. As I said, I'm very much a fan of your use of the we collective narrator, and it reminded me quite a bit of Jeffrey Eugenides' The Virgin Suicides. And I wonder why a collective narrative voice was the right one for you here, and how did you want to balance it with delving into each of the individual characters?
That's a great question. I chose the we voice because I really wanted to capture the communal identity of the team and the experience of being on a team where the team has a kind of personality that is even greater than the sum of all the individuals on the team. And I wanted this to be a we voice that was very interested in itself and interested in its members rather than being a kind of we, like a community we that's looking at like the kind of stranger comes to town sort of plot, which you see in a story like A Rose for Emily. And so I wanted to have a sense of the team kind of speaking for itself and speaking about its members and having a will that's greater than the sum of its parts. But I also wanted to have the ability to kind of sink into the point of view of a few characters and to reveal things about those characters that the team couldn't possibly know. So the team thinks it knows a lot, and sometimes it can say things about its members that the teammates can't say about themselves, the girls can't say about themselves. But sometimes it says the wrong things about them. And so I was interested in kind of creating a little bit of friction between what the team thinks it knows and what the individuals know about themselves.
And it's interesting also that team members believe that other team members know most things about them. And in the case of Danielle and Harriet, this will become a major issue. So it's not just that they believe they understand things about their teammates. They believe that there's an organicness to the fact that their teammates will know things about them as well.
Yeah, I think there's a certain degree or a great degree of intimacy among the members of the teams. And there's a way that, for instance, that Danielle believes that Harriet knows something very important about her. And the idea that Harriet knows this particular thing makes it easier for Danielle to kind of to deal with what's happened. I guess like what I was trying to get at was the way that sometimes if you can share a secret with another person, it makes it much easier to bear that secret. And I think that that's to a great degree what's happening among my characters, my runners, that they're sharing a lot of secrets and they're not sharing some secrets. But once they can share secrets, they can bear the pain of the secrets a lot more effectively.
I think a lot about running as joining some of the other pure aerobic sports like Tour de France cycling and cross-country skiing, maybe throw in crew in there, as defined principally by a willingness of the athlete to endure pain. Obviously, there are skills involved and a certain base level of athleticism is required, but as opposed to something like baseball, where hand-eye coordination is in part naturally had by a player and then developed and honed over years, competitive running is a deal with the devil, in which you bargain with your brain to continue to let your body do something that feels horrible. Can you talk about that bargain and how the runners of We Love to Run come to terms with it?
Yeah, I think that you said it so nicely. They are making deals with the devil because running always hurts. And to a great degree, the hardest part about running is the lead up to running, the lead up to a race.
Yeah.
When
I hate the 10 minutes before the gun goes off so much.
Yeah, exactly. So when they have more time to think, right? So when they're anticipating how much it's going to hurt and they haven't yet kind of flung their bodies forward into the act of running. And so that's why, I mean, it's like, that's why my novel is called We Love to Run. That's why the first line of the novel is, we hated we hated running, because I was trying to get at the kind of like the tension between doing something that you love, but doing something that is also extremely painful. And I mean, and that's also true of their relationships. The thing about cross country is that on the one hand, you're on a team and you can do very well as a team. If everyone runs well, you have a chance of qualifying for nationals. But at the same time, you're not totally dependent upon your team to excel at running. You can always do very, very well on your own and potentially, move on to ever more competitive races if you're very fast. And that creates a really interesting tension with your teammates, because you want them to run really fast, because if they run fast, there's a chance you'll run faster, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you also want to beat them. And so there's always this kind of push and pull, right? You're always chasing someone. You're always being chased. You hope you're chasing someone. And in a way, you hope you hope that there's someone behind you pushing you forward, because that sort of like those dynamics can only make you a better runner. But that also means you can lose to some of the people, who you're closest to. And that's quite painful as well.
Popeye's Scary Good new Freddy Fazbear Box has garlic palm tenders and cheesy bites with marinara sauce. Try it before it's too late. And see Five Nights at Freddy's 2, only in theaters. Love that chicken from Popeyes. Limited time at participating U.S. restaurants.
The Who's down in Who Newville were making their list, but some didn't know Walmart has the best brands for their gifts.
What about toys? Do they have brands kids have been wanting all year?
Yep, Barbie, Tony's, and Lego. Gifts that will make them all cheer.
Do you mean they have all the brands I adore?
They have Nintendo, Nespresso, Apple, and more.
What about...
So the Who answered questions from friends till they were blue. Each one listened and shouted, from Walmart? Who knew? Shop gifts from top brands for everyone on your list in the Walmart app.
This episode is brought to you by Casamigos Tequila. What do you bring to a holiday party? Simple, a bottle of Casamigos. Because nothing gets the party started like a Casamigos margarita, which isn't just for summer. In fact, it's the perfect pour all year round. Casamigos is the gift that always feels right, because anything goes with my Casamigos. Please drink responsibly. Imported by Casamigos Spirits Company, White Plains, New York. Casamigos Tequila, 40% alcohol by volume.
Yeah, it also goes alongside a really lovely sentiment that you have in the novel, which is that your teammates believe that you can run faster and that you believe that about them as well. And that there is a kind of a mutual desire for best possible self to come forward, even if it might sometimes cost you the race. And it presents this interesting tension between Kristin, who at the beginning of the novel is very much needing to win, needing to run away from things and run as fast as she can and to take that spot from Chloe, versus Danielle, who's very interested in a kind of collective having the best race for everybody. Mm-hmm. And I really like the fact that there's both that tension between wanting to win, but also believing that your teammates can run faster.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think every character has a particular role to play on my team. And so, so Danielle is the captain, and Danielle is the one who's going to be the cheerleader and who is going to believe the best about her teammates and hopefully get the best possible performance out of each of them, because that she has staked her success to their success. And then, as you say, at the other kind of extreme, or the other end of the spectrum, is someone like Kristin, who herself wants to be the best. But I think like Danielle, what Danielle thinks is that everyone has a role to play on the team. So she's the captain. Chloe is until this particular season, Chloe's the fastest one on the team. And that's okay, because Chloe is also sort of socially clueless. Kristin is the beautiful one. And the moment that Kristin wants to be both the fastest and is the beautiful one, that threatens the kind of equilibrium that Danielle is working so hard to establish on the team. Harriet is the feminist. Patricia is the outsider. and Liv has a boyfriend. And I think that these are things that oftentimes women will do in friendships, that they have a kind of little tally sheet of what each person brings to the relationship, and that it's very important that there's a kind of sense of balance between them.
I'm going to get myself in trouble for this, but having, played Little League baseball, I feel like I could write a short story that had elements of the experience of playing competitive baseball. But I feel like if I had never run a race, I would not be able to represent the experience of running at the limit of one's physical capability. And so while I typically steer clear of authorial experience as a instrument for understanding novels, your time at Amherst and running for the cross-country team there is, I think, deeply important to your understanding of running. And I wonder if you would talk a little bit about those experiences and whether they and how they came into your descriptions of the experience of running.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the team in my novel, the Frost Poets, really is very...
Love that name. I wish Amherst would change their name to the Poets.
Is quite different from the experience I had as a runner at Amherst in the late 80s and early 90s. I think it would be putting it generously to say that the Amherst women's cross-country team was building during those years, which is to say that we had a lot of trouble putting like 7 women on a cross-country course at the same time. So I did not have the experience of being pushed by my teammates. Instead, I had the experience of coming to Amherst and being very disappointed that the team wasn't better than it was. But I did devote so many years of my life to running. And when I think back on some of my most ecstatic moments in my life, there are moments when I'm outside running. I can remember a moment of being on the playing fields at Amherst at dusk and running intervals, and just how incredibly transporting it was to feel so fast. The thing about running at dusk is that, it takes away your depth perception. So before you know it, you are where you weren't before. So it makes you feel very, very fast. And so, I had like a lot of memories of running that I could pull on for this book. And I really loved remembering some of the dynamics or strategies of racing. But the team in We Love to Run is really fully fictional. And it was really fun to live with those characters for a period of time and to slowly get to know them and figure out what their stories were.
So this is as much a campus novel as it is a running novel. And we get a fine-grained portrait of life at Frost College as, in many ways, a stand-in for Amherst and other small, selective liberal arts colleges in the 80s and 90s. What were the aspects of culture, history, and politics that you wanted to flag as indicative of that period of time? And particularly what it would have been like to be a student at an elite liberal arts college at the end of the 20th century.
Well, I think that I really wanted to talk a lot about the nascent feminist theory that was it's not, I suppose it seemed nascent to me, but I was interested in
I think it was very much nascent, like late second wave.
Second wave feminism, exactly. So I wanted to capture a moment where it felt to me, at least during that time, that language starts to matter a lot, that you start to think about things like whether you're going to call yourself a girl or a woman and the distinction between those terms. You start to think about, I was interested in, having my characters begin to think about, well, what does it mean to be a feminist? What does it mean to have words to describe some of your experiences? So this is also a moment where terms like date rape start to kind of come into people's vocabulary. And it's a moment where I think that, people start to have a slightly better understanding of terms like consent. And so those were some of the things that I was trying to capture in the novel. I really wanted to make Harriet a sort of like a strident feminist who is reading Andrea Dworkin and other feminists like that. And then I wanted to sort of like push back against that a little bit in characters like Danielle.
Yeah, I mean, I was you predicted my next question, which was thinking about that moment of feminism, and particularly Andrea Dworkin, who was certainly a major figure for me as well, and such a kind of, I mean, someone who pushed the limits of how we might understand what feminism is and what parts of the world it might encompass. And Harriet is part of this kind of awakening. And so but she is also, someone who is fragile in a lot of ways and who is so slight. And so, she's really starved herself over the years and almost to the point of disappearing. And I found that tension between wanting women to have just all the agency and a voice and power and meaning in the society, and then nearly disappearing because of society's expectations for that body. And so could you talk a little bit about Harriet in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really interesting to me about Harriet and the kind of feminism that she's practicing is the idea that the personal is political, and that that Harriet has in a way like disappointed herself, or to some extent like betrayed her own sense of herself as a feminist by also having an eating disorder before she comes to Frost, and to a certain extent while she's still at Frost. I think like in the kind of late 80s and early 90s, women were negotiating ideas around like, well, what did it mean to be a feminist? And if you did declare yourself a feminist, like how did you need to behave? And what choices would you make that would show you were a feminist? And what choices would you make that would suggest that you weren't as good a feminist as you thought? I mean, I think like Harriet to some degree is like policing everyone's behavior in the novel, policing her teammates' behavior. She's always saying, whenever Danielle uses the word girl, Harriet says, "You mean women?" She's always correcting everyone. She wants to kind of like use the most vulgar version of words, like to just kind of like, she wants to take the romance out of everything, or she wants to take or even like the romanticization out of things, to just call a spade a spade. But at the same time, she's very tender. I think in Harriet, like, I guess like I wanted to show the ways that you had to kind of, at least that you might be expected to kind of perform your feminism in order to be a true feminist. But it always seemed to me that it was a lot more complicated than that.
Well, she ends up having kind of quite a romantic whirlwind intimacy with this other woman who sees her in very romantic terms, I think. And it is sort of jarring for her, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And she could never, she has presented herself to the team as kind of like jaded about everything. But in fact, she's like in the process of falling in love, and really falling in love for the first time with a woman, or with anyone for that matter. And so I think that, I just think it's like interesting, the kind of like the contrast between how you behave in public and how you behave privately, and what you think you need to do in order to be a good feminist.
So, I mean, to pick up again a little bit on this idea of women's bodies and eating and how they are seen by society, you get to the point directly in the novel that competitive running is simply different for men and women. On the one hand, running acts as a metaphor for women's strength and the possibility of their bodies. And on the other hand, it signifies all the ways in which society demands that they shrink away. And you've got these terrible scenes of the coaches doing weigh-ins with them and commenting on their body. And none of this happens to the male runners. And so I would love for you to just weigh in a little bit about this contradiction and this divide between how competitive running lives amidst the two genders here.
Yeah. I like your use of the word weigh in. That's stuff. I do think it's the case that there's that men and women's bodies are similarly surveilled in running, that there is a kind of competitive advantage that you potentially have by being a little leaner, both for men and women. But I do think, I think where it is different for women is that that kind of surveillance intersects with a lot of cultural surveillance that happens around women's bodies. And so not only do you have coaches saying, as the coaches in my novel do, weighing my runners and telling them that they all need to lose weight, or that if they gain weight, they're going to have to lead the workout. So punishing them for any sort of minimal, microscopic changes in their bodies. So you have that happening. And that also just totally plays into kind of bigger cultural narratives about how women's bodies are supposed to look. And so I think again, I don't think that men are immune from being feeling pressure to be lean as runners, but I just don't think it has the same sort of cultural weight. I think it's easier. I think it's easier for women to get seduced by the idea of making themselves disappear, whether they're runners or not. But it's particularly potent when you're a runner because that can give you a competitive edge. Not for very long, but for a short period of time. I mean, ultimately, we know that when you starve yourself for too long, you end up hurting your body. You end up with stress fractures, and you end up not being able to compete in the way that you'd like to.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
When the holidays start to feel a bit repetitive, reach for a Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry and put your twist on tradition. A bold cranberry and winter spice flavor fusion, Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry is a refreshing way to shake things up this sipping season. And only for a limited time. Sprite. Obey your thirst.
Oh, Hilton stay. Your beds are soft and cozy. No lumpy couch, no stiff futon, no shower line at crack of dawn. Oh, Hilton stay.
When you want holiday comfort you can count on, it matters where you stay. Enjoy comfortable rooms and friendly service when you stay with Hilton instead. Save up to 25% this season when you book with Hilton. Hilton for the stay. Terms apply.
I mean, so as you were saying that, I was thinking that while Harriet seems to, want her body to disappear, Kristin literally disappears off campus. And so you have these two versions of needing to disappear to be unseen. And I thought that was really clever to have her, exist in this kind of limbo world of that kind of off-campus. What is it? Is it a house?
It's just an abandoned farmhouse.
An abandoned farmhouse.
Yeah. Yes.
So, I'm just interested in that. There's two different kinds of disappearing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Kristin's trying to disappear in a lot of different ways. Kristin's trying to disappear or escape what happened to her over the summer. Kristin is trying to, I think, subjugate her feelings to a kind of promise she makes with herself. I mean, she promises in the book, she says to herself, if I'm the fastest runner on the team, I'm going to be okay. And, that's I think that's an act of disappearance, that, I'm going to ignore how I'm feeling by doing this thing, right? I'm going to pretend that, if I'm fast, it's going to make everything okay. And, and then she she literally, kind of at some point can't, when she's failing in the deal that she made herself, her only choice is to kind of literally disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I think the novel is about how is she going to emerge from what happened to her over the summer. And,
Mm-hmm.
and, it's not that she's not going to just acknowledge that she doesn't have control. I mean, so much of this novel is about control and the kind of like illusion of control that we often have when we're young.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about your two. I mean, you live within the worlds of all these different runners, but it's really Kristin and Danielle that act as our protagonists.
Mm-hmm.
And each of them carries this ghost of a terrible trauma inflicted on them by men, and they run from that ghost. So they're operating in this world where they need to run all the time physically, but then they're also running emotionally and psychologically, and that ends up being this, making at various periods of time running this terrifying thing. And I wonder if you talk a little bit about your two protagonists and how they deal with running after or running away from these ghosts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess in Danielle's case, I'm not sure I don't know that she's running from her ghosts. I think she's like drinking herself away from her ghost.
That's true. That's true. Yes, she is. She's doing a different kind of dissolving.
Yeah, doing a different kind of dissolving, right? Just like, and I don't, I think like her behavior is not extreme. I think it's very typical of like a lot of college students who are binge drinkers. And in her case, I think like it's a way for her to become more vulnerable, to treat herself, weirdly enough, like to be kinder to herself in those moments when she drinks too much. In the novel, in one situation, she dances with Kristin, and Kristin is standing on a table, and Danielle, who's very, very tall, finally feels like she's not towering over everyone. She's able to feel a little bit more cherished by others or supported by her teammates. I think it feels to her like she's not having to bear everything on her own. I think like with Kristin is certainly running from what happened to her over the summer, and she's doing it by making deals with herself, and she's also doing it by imagining that she could have controlled the outcome of what happened over the summer. If only she had known, she could have run away. And I think
she knows she could beat Jed in a foot race.
Exactly. She knows she could have beaten Jed. If she'd known what was going to happen, she could have run from him, and she would have run much faster. And I think that is just such a kind of, I think that idea is so alluring, right? That if only you'd known, you could change what happened. Or, I mean, the other thing that's so alluring about it is just like that, like, shouldn't your strength and your power matter, right? That's what these girls are so invested in, being strong. The women on the team are so invested in being strong. Shouldn't it matter? That's what they've spent their whole lives training to be fast. Shouldn't that matter? And the answer is like, sometimes it doesn't matter, right? That is like that is the kind of cruel truth of being a woman in this culture. Sometimes you cannot run fast enough to get away from the things that happen.
One of the things I was struck by is, as much as this is a portrait of late 20th century life, and specifically life for young women, it felt so eerily as though we were boomeranging back from any gains that had been made in how women might feel less afraid of their environments, less afraid of men, less afraid of being alone at night. And I wonder if you, as you were writing, saw that kind of reflection in the present, and in a way that's quite sad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one really interesting thing, Chris, is how different women of different ages have responded to what happens to Kristin in the novel. And I wanted to write something where it was clear that Kristin, I'm going to go ahead and give away the book, but it's clear that Kristin has been sexually assaulted, but it's also clear that I think that many women might see in Kristin's experience an experience that they themselves have had of like saying no until they just kind of give up and don't say anything at all. And a friend of mine who's around my age, who's 50, read the novel and said like, well, it's not such a big deal what happened to Kristin. I mean, this has happened to a lot of people. And then I had a younger person read the book who was like in her late 20s, and she was just like, she was just outraged by what happened to Kristin. And so I do think that we live in a moment where we have a much better understanding of consent, and we have many more conversations about consent and what it means. But I also think we live in a moment where things haven't changed as much as they should, as much as we'd like them to. So that was definitely on my mind. I mean, by setting it in the 90s, people have called it an historical novel, but I also wanted to sort of challenge readers to think about, well, how much has actually changed since the 90s?
Yeah.
And certainly when it comes to like surveys around consent and date rape, things haven't changed as much as we'd imagined, so that is definitely the case.
The incident with Jed, which it happens, they're in Boise, or are they outside of Boise when they go?
They're in the Sawtooth Mountains, so sort of
in the Sawtooth
central
Mountains.
Idaho.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is really the one geographic locale that we spend a lot of time in. That one section is pretty long. And we have a sense of Kristin's life in such a different environment than the one she lives in Frost. They've just gotten their first, real coffee shop.
Yeah.
And people are coming in and not sure what to order. And in comes this guy who sort of seems to know things about coffee and maybe about the world. But I'm interested in how craft-wise this scene that's really the one major scene outside of Frost came into being?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I wanted to convey the idea that things like what happened to Kristin and Danielle could happen anywhere. They could happen at Frost, at a small New England college. They could happen in the mountains of Idaho or in Boise, that it's not bound, certainly not bound by geography. So that's one thing I was thinking about. I was also thinking about the fact that I wanted to sort of spend more time with Kristin because I wanted something to happen to her that it was going to be difficult for her to ever describe to any of her teammates. And so that and that's, I think, one of the tensions in the final third of the book is that she has the sense that she can't possibly explain what was so terrible about what happened. And I think the reader starts to have a sense that that her teammates and her friends, they really love her, but they have to keep kind of reducing what happened to her to just a couple words, because it's kind of beyond the experience itself is beyond anything that Kristin can explain or really fully represent. So I wanted the reader to have this sense of kind of sinking into that experience, and it's just how strange and disoriented and horrible it is, and then to watch her try to explain it to people who really care about her, and just to see that it's almost impossible to capture what is so terrifying about what happened to her.
Yeah, because she's both got to describe an assault that she doesn't quite have the words for.
Right.
And then also the lunacy of what she's made to go through, this performance of, being having to pretend to be a bear all of a sudden, when she's thought she's having this, fairly normal, if adventuresome date. All of a sudden she's being asked to live in a fantasy world that she has no interest in.
Exactly. And that is just so disorienting, right? And so not only is the situation scary that she's decided to go off and go backpacking with a person she doesn't know very well, but then his behavior is so bizarre that she sort of I think she loses her sense of what's up and what's down, right? She's just completely destabilized by his behavior. And then she has to try to get out of there all by herself in the dark.
Yeah.
And
she keeps getting lost. And
right. And she gets lost. Exactly. And she gets lost. And she blames herself. I mean, I think what I was really interested in digging into with Kristin is just like how easy it is both for her to believe that she could have changed the outcome, but also how easy it is for her to give away her power, her sense, her willingness or her ability to say what happened was wrong. She gives him, psychologically, she gives him every chance to say, oh, this was just a big misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's the whole thing was totally terrifying.
Yeah.
But lest I leave us on a terrifying note, I'd love to know if you have things that you've been reading lately that you're excited about and maybe you'd like to share with my listeners.
Yes, absolutely. So one thing I'll say is that I think that we need more novels about women athletes. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to write this book, was just to kind of like reflect the fact that there's so many women who are amazing athletes, but we don't have a lot of fictional depictions of them. So the first book I'll recommend is A Sharp Endless Need by Marissa Crane. And it is a girls' basketball novel. And
Did this come out last year or the year before?
Yes, it came out it came out this year, actually.
Oh, it did? Okay.
Earlier this year. Yeah, exactly. I think in the spring of this year. And I just love it. Crane just does such an excellent job of capturing the kind of just the power and athleticism of being a girls' basketball player. And it also includes a heartbreaking love story as one girl falls in love with another and just kind of faces her love interest's fear of desiring another woman. So it's a gorgeous, gorgeous book. And
my son plays college basketball, so I'm going to have to buy this for him.
It's really great. And then the second book I would recommend is Charlotte Wood's novel Stoneyard Devotional,
which just was named one of the 10 best by New York Times books today.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I read it like a year and a half ago, and it is this lovely meditative novel about a woman who goes to a religious community just kind of on a weekend retreat, and she thinks that the women who live there are just so odd. She can't imagine anyone making that sort of decision to live in a religious community. And then the novel jumps forward 6 months and she's back and she's decided to stay there. And it's an incredible book about it's about spirituality and faith and living in community with other people.
Well, it sounds, I was already interested, but I'm doubly interested now. And these are great recommendations, but I really want my listeners to run out and get We Loved to Run by Stephanie Reents. It doesn't matter if you are a runner or despised running, you will find yourself falling in love with this team, with its individual members, and just about the way in which they want to swallow the world whole at this time of possibility and blooming, while also running as fast as they can away from ghosts and traumas. And I was totally preoccupied with it, and it's going to stay in my mind for a very long time. So thank you for talking to me about it, Stephanie.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
Well, that's all from me for now. My thanks to Stephanie Reents for coming on to talk about her novel, We Loved to Run. You can find links to purchase We Loved to Run and all of Stephanie's recommended books at the website, burnedbybooks.com. There you'll find all of our previous episodes, links to buy a podcast t-shirt, and ways to get in contact. As you listen, take a moment to rate the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Until next time, this has been Burned by Books.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here. Wishing you a very happy half-off holiday because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. And Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day, yeah? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.